You don't begin as a criminal. You begin as a miracle. You graduate at the top of your class from UNAM Medical School in Mexico City. Your specialization is maxillofacial reconstruction, which is the clinical way of saying you rebuild faces that have been taken apart by the world. Accidents, burns, birth defects that arrive before a child ever has the chance to understand what they mean. You are the surgeon they call when a construction worker falls 4 stories and needs a new jaw assembled from what's left. You are the one they bring in when a child is born with a cleft palate so severe the parents can barely look at their own baby without dissolving. You fix people. That is your identity. That is the sentence you repeat to yourself when you are elbow deep in a 14-hour surgery and your hands are trembling from caffeine and exhaustion and the particular kind of silence that only exists inside an operating room at 3 in the morning. You fix people. That is all you are. That is enough. You complete your residency at a public hospital in Guadalajara. You open a small private practice with careful optimism and a lease that costs more than you're ready to admit. And then reality arrives, the way it always does, without announcing itself. The patients who need your skills the most cannot afford you. The patients who can afford you want rhinoplasties and liposuction, not reconstructive miracles. Your savings erode. Your rent falls behind. Your equipment loan ages past the point of polite reminder letters into the territory of formal notices. You are a genius with a scalpel and a catastrophe with a balance sheet. The universe engineered you for medicine and simply forgot to install the business module. The offer arrives through a colleague, a friend from medical school who chose cosmetic surgery and now drives a Porsche Cayenne and wears a watch that costs more than your annual malpractice insurance. He takes you to dinner at a restaurant where the cheapest bottle on the wine list equals a month of your groceries. He leans across the table and chooses his words the way a man chooses words when he already knows the answer he wants. He has a client, he says, a special request, not the kind of reconstruction insurance recognizes. The client needs to stop looking like himself permanently. The compensation is $200,000 in cash for a single procedure. You almost choke on your water. $200,000 would eliminate your debt, fund your practice for a full year, and leave enough to finally fix the waiting room ceiling that has been leaking since March. You ask who the client is. Your friend smiles with the patience of someone who has rehearsed this moment and says the same thing every entrance to hell says. You don't need to know that. You only need to know the money is real. You should have stood up and walked out of that restaurant. Every rational corner of your mind understood that. But poverty has a particular way of rewriting logic, of converting red flags into green lights, and silencing the parts of you that are built to hesitate. Your bank account spoke louder than your conscience, and you listened. The first patient arrives at a private villa outside Guadalajara. He is brought in blindfolded, which is its own kind of irony, because you are the one who cannot see what you are walking into. The blindfold comes off. You are looking at a man in his 40s with a face you recognize, not from personal acquaintance, but from news broadcasts and federal bulletins. Not a celebrity, a wanted man. Cartel leadership tier. He looks at you with the settled calm of someone who has long since grown bored of watching people be afraid of him. He explains what he needs: a new nasal structure, an altered jawline, modified orbital geometry, enough to defeat facial recognition software, enough to move through an international airport without triggering an Interpol alert. He wants to look different, but not suspicious. A new man, not a damaged one. You understand in that moment that this is not cosmetic surgery. This is identity engineering. You are not making him beautiful. You are making him invisible. The procedure takes 9 hours. Your hands are steady because your hands have never learned to be afraid. That is the one part of you that remains untouched by everything else. You reshape the nasal bridge. You adjust the zygomatic arches. You modify the mandibular angle and introduce subtle implants that alter the overall geometry of his face in ways that are medically imperceptible but photographically transformative. When the bandages come off 3 weeks later, he studies his reflection for a long time. Then he smiles. He looks like a completely different person. His own mother would walk past him on the street. He hands you a duffel bag. Inside is $200,000 in banded stacks. He shakes your hand and says 3 words that become the hinge upon which the rest of your life swings. You're on retainer. That is where the movies always get it wrong. In film, the reluctant criminal is given a dramatic scene, a moment of moral weight, sad piano music, a choice that feels like a choice. In reality, the choice was made the instant you accepted the first patient. You now know what a federal fugitive's new face looks like. That information is more dangerous than anything in his arsenal. You are not an employee. You are a liability they have elected to manage through compensation rather than elimination. The distinction matters. The outcome is the same. The retainer is $50,000 per month. In exchange, you remain available. Anytime, any location, no questions. Your practice becomes a front. Officially, you are a private cosmetic surgeon with an expanding client patient list and a modest but credible reputation. Unofficially, you are the Cartel's Department of Facial Relocation, the division responsible for transforming fugitives into strangers. Over the next 4 years, you operate on 37 faces. Each patient arrives with a file containing almost nothing, a first name that is almost certainly fabricated, and a set of surgical specifications. You never learn their real names. You never learn what they did. You know only their bone structures, their skin elasticity, and the surgical pathway from the person they are to the person they need to become. Patient 9 is a woman, young, perhaps 25, and striking in a way that would ordinarily make her invisible to your services. But she doesn't want reconstruction. She wants erasure. She wants you to make her plain, unremarkable, the kind of face that moves through a crowd without leaving a trace. You ask why. She looks at you with eyes that have already traveled somewhere past hope and says, calmly, that the man who owns her cannot own a face he cannot find. You perform the surgery. You make her invisible. She walks out of your operating room and disappears from the surface of the earth. You never learn whether she made it. You never learn whether the man found her anyway. You file her face in the archive and continue, because stopping to feel anything would shut down the machine, and the machine is the only reason you are still alive. The archive is your insurance policy. From the very first patient, you have kept meticulous records. Before and after photographs, surgical notes, biometric measurements, facial mapping data, everything encrypted, stored across 3 separate physical locations. If the cartel ever decides you are more dangerous than useful, the archive goes simultaneously to the DIA, Interpol, and every major news organization in the world. It contains the constructed identities of 37 of the most wanted individuals in the Western Hemisphere. A single release would trigger the largest coordinated manhunt in modern history. The archive is your dead man's switch. It is the reason you sleep. Every 6 months, you update it and verify the encryption, because you have built your survival on a single assumption, that no rational organization would eliminate the one surgeon who holds the keys to 37 of its most valuable assets. In year 5, the cartel sends you an assistant. Her name is Lucia. She holds credentials from a hospital in Monterrey. She is professional, competent, and composed. In the operating room, she anticipates your needs with an intuition that functions almost like telepathy. She manages your schedule, organizes your files, sterilizes your instruments with the care of someone who genuinely respects the craft. And she is the first person in 5 years who speaks to you as though you are a human being rather than a precision instrument. You share meals after long procedures. She asks about medical school. You tell her about the construction worker's jaw and the child with the cleft palate. She listens with real attention, and you recognize that you have been starving for exactly this, for someone who sees the doctor you used to be instead of the machine you have become. Over months, she becomes the closest thing you have to a real relationship. Not romantic, something more necessary than that. A witness, someone who watches you work and reflects back the version of yourself you can still tolerate. The 38th patient arrives on a rainy night. The protocol is unchanged. Private location, armed escorts, blindfolded entry. The blindfold comes off. Male, late 30s, distinctive features, a face that carries the particular weight of someone accustomed to consequence. The specifications are the most comprehensive you have ever received. Full nasal reconstruction, jawline reshaping, cheekbone augmentation, eyelid modification, an 11-hour surgery, your finest work. When the bandages come off, the man looks at himself in the mirror for a long time. He does not smile. He nods once and leaves without a word. 3 days later, your phone rings. A number you don't recognize. A voice that is digitally altered, stripped of any quality that could identify it. The voice tells you to check your archive. You drive to the first location. The drive is there, but the files have been modified. Before, photographs for 12 patients have been replaced, biometric data corrupted, surgical notes rewritten into clinical meaninglessness. You check the second location, the same. The third drive is simply gone. The insurance policy you spent 5 years constructing has been gutted from the inside. You sit in your car and you work through the list of people who knew the archive existed. The list has one name on it. You return to the clinic. Lucia is there, organizing files with the unhurried calm of a woman who has already done everything she came to do. You confront her. She doesn't deny it. She doesn't pause or flinch or reach for an explanation. She simply turns to face you, and something in her expression shifts. Not her face, but the thing behind it. The warmth evaporates. The softness was a performance. She tells you, without raising her voice, that she was embedded with you 2 years ago by the organization's internal security division. Her assignment was to locate your insurance policy, map every physical site, and neutralize it without alerting you. She accomplished this across 23 months of dinners and conversations and surgical assists. Every moment of human connection you believed you were experiencing was an intelligence operation conducted at close range. And then she tells you the part that stops the blood in your veins. Lucia is was not her name. She was patient 11. 3 years before she walked into your clinic, you operated on a woman and gave her a completely new face. That woman spent 2 years in recovery, training, building a history, constructing a legend as a surgical nurse. Then she returned, wearing the face you gave her, and you hired her without hesitation because she was competent and professional and had a face you did not recognize because you are the one who built it. You constructed the instrument that dismantled you. Your own craftsmanship was so precise, so complete, that you could not detect it standing 3 feet away for 2 years. Every technique you mastered, every innovation you developed, every refinement that made you exceptional, all of it was used to engineer the one person you would never suspect. Your art became your blindfold. The final call comes that evening. Your handler informs you that the organization is restructuring. Your services are no longer required. You know the corporate language. You know exactly what it means. You have 48 hours. You move. You clear the clinic. You take cash, a passport, and the one drive that survived, a partial archive, the files Lucia either missed or chose to leave intact. You don't know if it's enough to bargain with. You drive south toward the coast because north means checkpoints and east means territory that belongs to them. You drive through the night, trying to calculate your options, but the variables keep collapsing because every assumption in your model was built on information Lucia controlled. At dawn, you pull into a gas station, you walk in exhausted, buy water, hand over cash. The attendant makes your change and then pauses just slightly for 1 second too long and looks at your face with the faint squint of someone who senses something familiar but cannot locate the source. You have seen that squint before. You have watched it cross the faces of patients' family members who cannot explain why the person in front of them feels subtly wrong. It is the moment someone registers the seams without knowing what they are looking at. And standing there under fluorescent light at 6 in the morning, you are struck by the worst thought you have ever had. How many of the faces you pass every day were made by you? How many people in gas stations and airports and grocery stores are moving through the world wearing identities you assembled on operating tables in the middle of the night? You created an invisible army, and you cannot recognize a single one of them. Any stranger could be patient 6, patient 19, another Lucia in a waiting phase wearing a face you made for exactly this purpose. You did not just lose your archive, you lost the ability to trust what you see. The skill that made you valuable, the capacity to transform a human face into something unrecognizable, has rendered your entire reality illegible. You are the architect of a world where faces lie, and you can no longer tell which ones are yours. You walk back to the car. You look in the rearview mirror, and for the first time in your life, you do not trust what looks back at you.